Rotation is the movement of the Earth on its own axis. Rotate means to turn, so the Earth turns around a slightly inclined imaginary line that joins the two poles called the axis.
None of it makes sense. The problem is that we're taught as children, this ball Earth lie, and you might ask as a child, what about the people in Australia? They're standing on the bottom of the globe, won't they fall off? And your teacher says, no, gravity. And you go, oh, okay. And you never go back to that question. But when you go back to it as an adult and start looking at it with a critical eye, right, the whole thing falls apart.
Earth, throughout its life, even when it formed, it was spinning, and it got a little wider at the equator than it does at the poles. So it's not actually a sphere, it's oblate. And officially it's an oblate spheroid. That's what we call it. But not only that, it's slightly wider below the equator than above the equator.
A little chubbier.
A little chubbier.
Yeah.
Chubby's a good way. It's like pear-shaped.
Yeah.
As you say, the globe is spinning at 1,000 miles an hour. Neil deGrasse Tyson, who's a leading astronomer in America, tells us that the Earth is not a perfect circle, it is actually an oblate spheroid. It's squashed and wider at the equator. So my question to him would be, why is there land at the equator? Because water will move more readily than rock. So if the Earth is spinning, the water will be collected at the equator. I mean, if you spin a wet tennis ball, okay, you spin a wet tennis ball, the water shoots off at the equator, essentially. So all the water will be gathered around the equator. So why is there land at the equator? Doesn't make any sense. The other thing that's about the spinning Earth is looking at the stars. Now, directly above the axis of spin is the pole star, Polaris, okay, directly over the North Pole. And we're told that the reason that all the stars spin around the North Star is because the Earth is spinning at 1,000 miles an hour. Okay, seems to make sense, because if you put a long exposure camera pointing at the North Star, you'll see the stars will make perfect circles around, perfect star trails. The only problem is the Earth is also orbiting the Sun at 67,000 miles an hour. Okay, the Sun is moving, dragging the Earth and all the planets up that way or that way at 600,000 miles an hour. So why do we see perfect circles? Because that's the slowest speed, that's slowest motion in that mix, and yet the Earth is moving 67 times faster that way and 600 times faster that way. So you should see the stars do all sorts of strange motions, but you don't. You only see them make these perfect circles. That tells me that it's the stars that are moving, not the Earth. The thing is, what the scientists will give you is calculations and and theories why that happens. But we have experience. We see things and they either make sense or they don't make sense. What the scientists do is substitute our common sense and our intuition for calculations and theory, and we're supposed to believe the calculations rather than what we experience ourselves. There was a famous experiment back in the 1800s in England called the Bedford Levels experiment. Now, the Bedford Levels is a canal that is perfectly straight for 6 miles. Okay, so what a chap called Samuel Rowbottom did was he took a telescope, put it in the water about 8 inches above the water, and he had a friend, in a rowboat with a flag on the back, row all the way to the other end, and he was able to see the flag on the back of the rowboat the whole distance. Now, according to spherical trigonometry, the curve of the Earth is 8 inches per mile squared. So over 5 miles, that's 5 times 525 times 8, which is 200, works out, that's 200 inches, which works out at 16 feet. That means the boat should have been 16 feet below the horizon. You shouldn't have been able to see the boat. The limit of your vision is supposedly 3 miles. And then after 3 miles, you're supposed to see the boat start to go over the horizon. It's funny that Neil deGrasse Tyson again says that, explains that you can't see the curvature of the Earth from a plane. He says this, you can't see the curvature of the Earth from a plane because you're not high enough. The Earth is so big that you can't get high enough to see the curvature. Yet, you can apparently see a boat go over the curvature, over the distance of 3 miles, which doesn't make sense. If you were to go to NASA and download one of their photos of the Earth in the moon's sky and put it in Photoshop, okay, drop the saturation and the levels down, you'll see that the Earth has been pasted in, because you'll see a rectangular box around the Earth. It's all fraud, it's all fake. Pretty much everything NASA puts out is fraudulent. There are no images of Earth from space. The only one that NASA actually claims is a photograph was from 1972, and it's the famous picture. It's got Africa sort of near the top, and it's the same picture they've been using for the last 40 or 50 years in every textbook. Every other image is what they call a composite. It's Photoshop.
It is photoshopped, but it's has to be.
A video I'm working on at the moment, I've got video from what they call the Galileo space probe. As it left Earth, it took a series of shots of Earth, apparently, and you see that over the course of 25 hours, the clouds never move. They will also say that if a sniper is trying to hit something a great distance, a couple of miles away, they have to take into consideration the spinning of the Earth, because they say that as the bullet leaves the muzzle of the gun, it's now independent of the rotation of the Earth. So, the Earth will spin away from where the bullet, and you have to take that into account. They say that about artillery shells as well, but it's not true. If that was true, a sniper would have to spend ages and ages calculating how to make that shot, and they don't. They literally take into consideration the wind and the elevation, and they don't take the Coriolis effect into consideration at all. Also, planes. If that works for bullets, if bullets, as soon as they leave the Earth, they're now independent of the spin, then why doesn't it work for planes? But how is it that you can take a flight from London to New York and it will take exactly the same time as a flight from New York to London? Yeah? One's with the spin of the planet and the other one's against it. So it doesn't make sense. They'll say that the whole atmosphere is moving, yeah, with the planet, but that doesn't make sense either, because the atmosphere, say it's that thick, the top layer of the atmosphere will be moving slow, and as further you get in, will be moving faster. So how, if everything is moving like that, how do you get a light breeze that blows against the spin of the planet? There is so much to this. As I said, if you start looking and asking questions about the very basic things, you'll find that the answers you were given as a child just do not make sense. So the idea there is that it must be a globe, because the sun, if the sun's here, then it's got to be dark on the other side. Well, the thing about the sun is that we're told it's 93 million miles away. It's not. It's actually something around 3,000 miles away, and about 34 miles across. That might sound really crazy, but if you look at look out on a day that's got broken cloud, you'll see that the sun rays will come out at an angle. Most people have seen this. The rays come down at angles. If the sun was 93 million miles away, then all the light will be coming parallel. So if you imagine, there's no way to show 93 million miles, but something way, way over there, all the light that reaches this globe will be parallel. There's no way that light can come that far and spread out like that. Now, if you follow those light rays, you'll see exactly where the sun is. And as I said, it works out to be about 3,100 miles. If that's the case, and the sun is circling over this flat plane, yeah, its light range is limited, so it's illuminating the part of the Earth it's like over at the moment. So, say over Europe, it might, or over South America there, it's over there. Well, Australia's going to be in the dark because the sun isn't going to throw enough light to illuminate Australia. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you actually see video of the sun coming up and going down, many times you'll see that the sun starts off as it's coming up very, very tiny, and it gets bigger as it gets closer to midday and then gets smaller again. It's literally that effect of perspective, you know, with some things above you, like the ceiling in a hallway, yeah, as it goes further away, it will seem to sink down towards the horizon until it disappears. Disney and NASA have worked very closely together. Disney worked with NASA on the moon project. Yeah, they made it, they filmed it so that it would be entertaining for the masses. Yeah? It's a joke. It was meant to fool people in 1960s. So you got like clear footprint, but yet you don't have an impression where the pads of the lunar lander were, or a blast crater where the engines were blasting downwards. And also, the camera followed the capsule straight up, mm-hmm. right? And it followed it very precisely, right? And it stopped when it started to pitch over, right? Now, there's not too many people involved in this. I mean, NASA controls space as such. The other agencies have popped up, but literally it's a money-making scheme. NASA makes, you know, hundreds of billions of dollars a year.
Okay.
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again.
That isn't the first thing that's been hidden over the years. I mean, we're all driving petrol cars because 100 years ago, the Rockefeller family basically cornered the market on oil, and the car industry was going electric. So, you know, all cars would have been electric from the get-go, but they basically forced everybody to use petrol cars. Well, the Bible has a very, very clear view of what this place is, and it matches that place more than it matches this. Okay, and what it says is the great deep is under it, just water. It's just deep water, and above the firmament is water. And you know, it says in Genesis that he separated the water below from the water above and made a space. The moon. If you get a piece of card, put it on the floor, and sort of you put another piece of card to act as a barrier for the moonlight. So you have the moon above, card on the floor, and a piece of card in front to shield half of the card. Yeah. Now, a lot of people have these laser thermometers. Now, you can actually measure the temperature of the moonlight next to the temperature of the shade of the moonlight, and you'll find the moonlight is colder than the shade, the opposite from the sun. So the moon is throwing out its own light, and that light is the opposite from the sun. Now, that tells you that it's not reflecting the sun's light. It's producing its own, and its light is different from the sun's.